What's up, I'm Nathan. You can find me on Twitter at GreatNateMTG. This is the first video in a video series that I'm creating for my favorite deck in the modern format, Blue-White-Red Geist. What I want to do with this video series is a couple of things. I want to start off with a deck introduction. I want to give people that might already know a good sense of what this deck is, what its strategy is trying to accomplish, and the cards that it's using to get there. I also want to talk a little bit about what its good and bad matchups are, and if you're on the fence or thinking about playing this deck yourself, give you a little bit of some information that hopefully helps you make a decision. With the other videos, I'd like to really get into sideboarding. Blue-White-Red has a lot of very powerful sideboard options, and I think that going over each card individually, as well as showing a guide for different deck types and what cards are bad against them that the deck plays and what cards are good against them that the deck plays, is something that hopefully the people that are playing this deck will find valuable. So that being said, what is Blue-White-Red Geist? Well, first off, it is a mid-range aggro control deck. Now, the reason people don't refer to it as just Blue-White-Red mid-range is because there are Blue-White-Red mid-range decks that don't feature Geist of St. Traft. Maybe they feature more Restoration Angels or something, but the deck that we're covering is Blue-White-Red Geist, and that's why they have the name in there. The deck is built around Geist of St. Traft. So, what is mid-range? Mostly everybody probably already knows, but typically Magic games have three phases: the beginning, the middle, and the late game. Mid-range decks do most of their powerful things and attempt to win the game in the mid-range and the middle of the game. Aggro control specifically is a sub-archetype of mid-range, but it's one of my favorite decks to play. Aggro control decks have the ability to be aggressive when necessary, or switch into a more controlling role when that's the strategy that's going to help them win the game. So the decks oftentimes, I think, have a lot of flexibility, give you a lot of different lines of play, and are fun to play. You don't have one linear strategy. It's not just play all your creatures and attack. It's more nuanced than that. You really have to learn to get a feel for, if you're playing a controlling role, when do you switch to becoming aggressive. So, as I said, the deck is aggro control, and this deck spends the first part of the game being reactive. Whether it's removing creatures or denying your opponents the ability to play powerful or to play spells that further their game plan, the deck wants to be reactive in nature in the beginning. You want to react to what your opponent is doing and prevent them from doing that. It uses a variety of cards, Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt, Mana Leak, Spell Snare is another popular one that I don't have shown here, but these are all cards that have a very low mana cost, so they're available very early in the game and allow you to react to your opponent's game plan. Interestingly enough, Lightning Bolt, with the use of Snapcaster Mage, also in the later parts of the game can be a win condition in and of itself, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So that's what the deck does in the beginning. Reactive. Disrupt your opponent, deny your opponent, tempo back, meaning slow them down. In the mid-range is where the deck, I feel like, really comes alive or has its most power. Now, it's not always the case, but in a perfect world, what you're going to do is hit turn 3 and slam Geist of St. Traft onto the table. That's not always the correct line of play, but that's, in a perfect world, what the deck wants to do. It wants to slam Geist of St. Traft and then begin attacking. Now, interesting enough, sometimes you may play Geist but not attack. What's great about Geist is because he has hexproof, once you've resolved him on the battlefield, he's difficult for a lot of decks to remove. So a lot of times you can spend your mana, get Geist out, and then go back to controlling the game until you can create an opportunity for Geist of St. Traft to begin killing your opponent. The other thing the deck wants to do in the mid-range of the game is play spells that generate extra value. That can be like playing Restoration Angel to bounce Snapcaster Mage to buy back a Lightning Bolt. It can be 2 for winning your opponent and drawing a card with Electrolyze. And it can be various modes of Cryptic Command. I actually like Cryptic Command in this deck a little bit more than I do just the controlling version, because it has a nice synergy with Geist of St. Traft, and you can play Cryptic Command aggressively. You can use it to tap all your opponent's creatures, bounce one if you want to generate additional tempo, or draw a card if that's what you need to do then, but tap all their creatures so that you can get 6 damage in with Geist of St. Traft. Now, as the game goes later, what the deck is really trying to do is finish the game. Now, it may be burning them out. The deck wins a lot of times by doing that. You know, you don't always need to kill him with Geist. Sometimes you just need to hit him once, and then maybe, if you're lucky, attack again, let Geist die, but get 4 damage in with your Angel, so that on the following turn you can go, you know, Bolt, Snapcaster, Bolt, and kill him that way. The deck wins, a lot of people might say, by attrition. It spends the first part of the game 1 for 1-ing. It may generate additional value in the mid game, but sometimes you do end up in a top deck war, and it's good that the deck draws live, meaning a lot of its cards are strong, or almost all of their cards are strong and relevant on their own, but some of the cards that you employ earlier in the game, like Celestial Colonnade to generate mana, become a spell by themselves later on in the game. So Celestial Colonnade is great for trying to close the game out, and some configurations of the deck also run 5-drop finishers like Thundermaw Hellkite. So, you know, maybe you are getting in a top deck war and you draw Thundermaw and you're able to play him and almost guarantee to get damage through and close the game out that way. So that's more or less how the deck functions. Obviously, it's not that simple. The deck switches roles. You know, you may stay in a control phase for quite a while until you close the game out with Geist, or maybe another one of these cards. But sometimes against certain decks, the deck just gets aggressive from the beginning. You know, if you see that they're playing something like Tron, you know, the moment that, you know, they're passing your turn back to you, you may go ahead and sack a fetch land, play a Steam Vents untapped. You're taking 3 damage, but then you're bolting them in the face. You know, you're untapping and holding up mana because at the end of their turn, you're going to resolve Snapcaster Mage and begin attacking immediately. You know, the deck can also be aggressive when needed. And I think because of that, it is a very fun and rewarding deck to play. So what is the deck good against? Well, clearly it's good against any decks that play creatures. It plays a lot of removal, but it's also good against combo decks because of the permission or the control cards that the deck packs. You're able to have a game against decks that are trying to do one big thing and win. Traditionally, I won't call it Jund here because Jund has been a very difficult matchup because they've lost Deathrite Shaman. That matchup is a lot better for you. It's still going to be a grindy matchup. It's still going to be difficult, but because Deathrite Shaman's no longer in the format, their discard spells tend to lose a little bit more value because now instead of being able to discard that spell and then exile it with Deathrite Shaman, you're able to buy it back with Snapcaster Mage. So the deck, while still challenging, is one that you have a better matchup against. Ramp decks, again, like depending on the ramp deck, you know, you like the mono green one, maybe you're removing creatures and then trying to get in damage, or maybe you're just trying to race them. But the important thing to note here isn't to talk about every single matchup, but the deck has a lot of matchups that are either fair or good for you. Like I said before, the deck has a lot of game against a lot of decks. There are some decks that do present a lot of challenges for you. Boggles is one. All their guys are hexproof. It's difficult to interact with them, and even if you're sideboarding in sweepers, with the auras of the Boggles deck, you know, it can make your sweepers ineffectual. Now there are sideboard cards that make the Boggles match up better, but oftentimes you don't want to waste slots on Boggles unless you think that you're going to be, you know, playing a lot of it, because it's just not a deck that is as played as other decks. And then I've also had some trouble with the discard decks. You know, when a mono black deck goes turn 1 Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, and then goes turn 2 Wrenchmind, and then goes turn 3 Liliana of the Veil, then, you know, that is probably lots of decks, but that's something that can be difficult for this deck to contend with. It's something that, again, can be made better in the sideboard, but it can be a more difficult matchup for this deck. So that's just a general overview of some of the things the deck is good against and some of the things the deck is bad against. So why would you want to play this deck? Well, as I said before, the deck can quickly switch between being aggressive and being controlling and vice versa, and I think that's a fun deck to play. It's fun to be able to switch modes, and as you get a better sense of it, it's also rewarding to be able to know that you have a game plan that you can switch into. The deck plays Snapcaster Mage, probably the best creature in blue right now, maybe the best creature in the format. It allows you to use your graveyard like a toolbox, regain value on spells that you've already played. Snapcaster Mage is excellent. I also said this, but the deck does play a lot of cards that are good on their own. So, you know, sure, the deck's going to draw lands, but a lot of the real cards that you're drawing are impactful cards. They are cards that allow you to do powerful things. And so it's a deck that draws well. One of the other things I really like about Blue, White, Red is it gets access to so many different cards, and this deck in particular just is very configurable. You know, depending upon what your metagame is, maybe you want to run 4 Electrolyze because they're running a lot of small creatures, and that's just great for this deck. You know, maybe you want to lower the Electrolyze count and run more Path to Exiles because there's a bunch of large creatures. The deck just has a lot of flexibility to be customized to fit whatever metagame it is that you're facing, in addition to having a powerful sideboard. I mean, the deck gets access to cards like Shatterstorm against Affinity, you know, destroy all artifacts, can't be regenerated. That's very powerful play. It just hoses that deck. It gets access to cards like Stony Suns to not allow opponents from activating artifacts. Hurts decks like Affinity and Birthing Pod and other decks as well. We'll talk more about the sideboard, but you just get a lot of options with this deck. And probably the biggest reason of all, it plays Geist of St. Traft. He's my favorite creature, and I'm glad to be able to play him in a format that I really enjoy and have, you know, reasonable success with it. Oh, one thing I did mention before, the deck, the Modern in general is a format that rewards players for knowing their decks. But this deck is on, I think, the high side or the far side of rewarding you for knowing it better. You know, decks say like Naya Aggro, you're playing your creatures and you're attacking. It's got a linear game plan. But this deck has lots of interactions with other decks, and I think it really rewards you learning it and learning how those interactions work and what better lines of play are. So that wraps it up for the deck introduction. I hope it was helpful if you weren't familiar with the deck, and if you were, I just hope that you enjoyed it. As I said before, I want to get into sideboarding and sideboard cards and matchups and some of the other videos, but if there's anything that you guys would like to see, please let me know. Again, you can find me on Twitter at GreatNateMTG. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, and I hope to post a new video soon. Thanks.